Imina Shetty, the legislature in Guam is back in session this morning. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the House rules, if we can go to the second reading.
On that motion, notwithstanding the House rules, to go back to second reading, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized. We are now on second reading. We are on Bill number 130-37 COR. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you. And now for the day, Madam Speaker and colleagues. Bill number 130-37 COR is an act relative to authorizing the extension of concession agreements of the Antonio B. Wampat International Airport Authority of Guam. I've stated during the public hearing that this bill is a simple measure authorizing an extension of concession agreements of our only commercial airport, Guam International Airport Authority, also known as the AB Wampat International Airport. We have heard from the different business and employees of the importance of the concession agreement for their operation and livelihood. GIAA management informed us that with the last several years, our airport has severely suffered losses in revenues due to the negative impact of the COVID pandemic and now the super typhoon Mawar. This bill provides a revenue stream for our airport to operate efficiently and to ensure financial security with the extension in place. Businesses are able to provide products and services to passengers entering and or connecting via Guam. Also, this measure allows GIAA to improve and be innovative, which promotes economic recovery and growth. I am thankful for the support of my colleagues and look forward to the passage of this measure. Madam Speaker, I only have one amendment, and it is on the drive, and I'd ask my co-sponsor, Senator Jesse Lujan, to speak on that amendment. It's only to add a legislature's intent and findings. That's all.
All right. Well, just a minute. So you're introducing an amendment. Okay. So so those who want to speak on the amendment, we'll begin with Senator Lujan on the amendment. Can you read your amendment, Senator San Augustine?
Yes. It's to add a new section 1 to the bill to read Section 1, legislative findings and intent. Legislature 1 finds that given the damage and uncertainty caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, Typhoon Mawar, and other geopolitical issues and hardship that have arisen over the past several years, it is projected to take at least several years for the territory visitors industry and for AB Wampat International Airport to achieve in-plane trajectory and financial stability through the restoration of operating reserves and capital improvement funds expected prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Accordingly, Legislature in Guam finds that the current GIAA concessions are in the best interest of GIAA and the territory, and an extension of such concession is in the best interest of GIAA and the territory. And then also to change Section 2, authority to grant extended concession agreements. The AB Wampat International Airport is authorized to...
On that one, it's just the numbering, right?
Yes, that's correct. Just changing the numbering.
And then it says on the bottom to allow Legislative Council and the clerks to make technical corrections.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. So on the amendment, Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the amendment, I am in total agreement, of course, and co-sponsor of the Section 1, legislative findings and intent. To add that on, I encourage my colleagues to vote on that amendment. Madam Speaker, the amendment was added based on the public hearing that was had regarding Bill 130-37, an act relative to authorizing the extension of the concessions agreement with the Antonio B. Wampat International Airport Authority. Over the past several years, Madam Speaker, the world has seen, of course, and experienced unprecedented and unimaginable events and circumstances which have drastically disrupted or changed all of our lives. This is worldwide, basically. COVID-19 pandemic brought the worldwide travel industry to an abrupt and immediate halt. Guam tourism, as we all know, which is their primary industry, was severely devastated. Consequently, arrivals at the Antonio B. Wampat Guam International Airport Authority precipitously dropped to almost zero, if not zero at most of the times there. These dramatically affected the AB Wampag Guam International Airport Authority revenue and financial stability. We all understand, of course, that COVID-19 pandemic recovery is a deliberate process and takes a collaborative effort. We have to commend, of course, the GIAA folks up there, its directors and employees and the stakeholders, all of whom have been working tremendously hard alongside the Guam Visitors Bureau and various other organizations on the recovery of Guam's tourism and travel industry from the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. As that was happening, we got whacked by, of course, Typhoon Mawar. We all have seen and are very much aware of the catastrophic damage Typhoon Mawar has done to our island. The airport was not spared. We've all seen in social media during the typhoon or afterwards all that water that was gushing from the second floor all the way down. And to date, a lot of their equipment, their elevators, escalators, are still inoperable and still awaiting fixing. We saw the catastrophic situation that all did. Additionally, with the damage suffered in Tumon, our travel industry and the tour industry has suffered another significant setback. As the Guam International Airport Authority, the AB Wampag Guam International Airport Authority, works on its recovery efforts to improve its employment trajectory, its financial stability, and the repairs of Typhoon Mawar damages, it needs additional help. GIAA revenue concessions, which are GIAA's main source of non-airline revenue, have or will soon expire. While these concessions may continue on a month-to-month basis, month-to-month holdout basis, under certain circumstances, they must also recover and cannot be expected to make the necessary improvements and investments needed as part of the recovery, unless their concession terms are extended. Furthermore, considering the condition of the airport and the state of our tourism industry, now is not the time for the Guam International Airport Authority to issue procurements for these concessions. The market is obviously very bad. GIAA has asked us to help with the passage of Bill number 130-37. This law will give the GIAA and our island the time we need to get our recovery back on track, and it's in the best interests of our airport and our island. Without this law, GIA will be substantially handicapped in its recovery efforts, Madam Speaker. Therefore, I respectfully urge all my colleagues here this morning to join the recovery efforts and vote in favor, not only in this amendment, but this bill, Madam Speaker, Bill 130-37. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Senator Duenas, on the amendment.
Sidus Masi, Madam Chair. Certainly rise in full support of the amendment, and I'm glad that the author of the legislation, as well as the co-sponsor to this amendment, Senator Lujan, and of course the author, Senator San Agustin, have added this legislative intent. This is the reason why I'm supporting this bill, Madam Speaker. In any other circumstance, of course, we will always want to ensure that competitive bids are issued. But we are now have had basically, for certain, 2.5 years of almost no movement within the airport. And just as we were starting to recover, a massive typhoon, Mawar. I don't see how any business could be expected to have to withstand all of that economic downturn and still pay the rent and be in good standing as a vendor in the airport. I was also heartened by the testimony, particularly of Ricky Hernandez and others board members as well, and management, by explaining in detail that this is industry-wide. The Guam International Airport did not wake up one morning and make a decision, hey, I got a good idea, let's give a 3-year extension to those who have been harmed by no fault of their own with a worldwide pandemic, as well as, now on top of it, a super typhoon. I'll speak on the main motion as well, but I want to say that it was very compelling in terms of the airport's presentation, and it will be unusual and not too particularly fitting for my position under normal circumstances. But I don't look at this as a normal circumstance. And I don't think many other jurisdictions throughout the United States and perhaps around the world who have concession agreements have made these same decisions because of an extraordinary situation. So with that, Madam Speaker, I have other things to mention on the main motion, but I think this addition of the intent was absolutely necessary and compulsory so that anybody reading this bill would understand the purpose for which anybody would take extraordinary circumstances where extraordinary circumstances exist. Sidus Masi, Madam Chair.
Sidus Masi, Senator Dueñas. On the amendment. Vice Speaker.
So we are on the amendment. I'm going to recognize Speaker Therese Chalaye at this time. You may proceed.
Good morning, colleagues. If I could just pose a question to the sponsor, if he would yield, I would just like to ask, why is this amendment necessary?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Joseph Augustine, would you like to yield to that inquiry, please?
Sure, Madam Speaker. The purpose of that was just to make sure that it's clearly understood why they're asking, we're granting them a 3-year extension. Very simple. If you look at it's legislative findings and intent.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. Speaker Chalaye, you may still proceed.
Thank you. My concern with the amendment, and I'm not going to support this amendment because I feel like we're trying to get around the procurement law somehow by saying this is in the best interest of the airport, this is in the best interest of the territory, and sometimes when there are procurement disputes, those making the decisions have to decide what is in the best interest. And so I feel like we're trying to, I'm hoping we're acting in the best interest of what we think is the best interest, but I just feel by putting it in here, it's something related to dictating the outcome of any procurement protest that might arise on the bill. And as you know, this bill is dead set in the middle of litigation that's ongoing, and I'm not familiar that much with the litigation itself, but I do know that it's ongoing. It hasn't been resolved. The airport has told us they refuse to issue out regular procurements on any concessions because of the ongoing litigation with those two giant corporations competing for the big concession. And they would not explain to us what the issues were that prevented them from putting out bids for the smaller concessions, such as the food and beverage, and they said it's all related to the big litigation. And I just think by saying also that I'm not really sure what this means. It says it's projected that the hardships that have arisen are projected to take at least several years for the territory's visitor industry and for the airport to achieve the employment trajectory and financial stability through the restoration of operating reserves and capital improvement funds expected prior to COVID-19. Some of the arguments made in favor of this amendment is that these concessions have been forced to withstand economic downturn and still make payment on their rent. But we heard testimony at the hearing and other hearings that actually they were given big breaks on their rent with federal funds that the airport received. They also were entitled to all the federal funding that other businesses across Guam, and I want to say it is not only an industry-wide issue that Guam faced. It was not only the airline industry or the airport industry or the concessions in airports industry that was affected. It was our entire island. We have a tourist-driven economy prior to the pandemic. And so I think it's very similar to other industries island-wide, is what I'm trying to say. All of our industries, then, should get big breaks on their procurement. We know that there was rental assistance directly given by the airport. There was also rental assistance programs that were sponsored by GIDA and federal funds and SBA. There were also business relief programs. And I'm not saying these businesses still don't need it. I am just saying that this is a big, huge exception that this bill is trying to make to the procurement, the normal procurement. And if we use this rationale, we should be making big, huge exceptions and continuing every single lease out there, every single agreement that the government has made for 3 more years without any competitive bidding. I'm a little weary of that, especially without the explanations that we asked for at the hearing, Madam Speaker, so I'm just cautious, I guess. I think when we're putting ourselves as a legislature right dab in the middle of a procurement, every word that we say might have an impact on that litigation. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Anyone else on the amendment? Senator Chaitigui, on the amendment as proffered by Senator San Augustine and Senator Lohan, you may proceed. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Madam Speaker, and good morning to my colleagues on this Monday. You know, Madam Speaker, of course I stand in support of the legislative intent. Why not? I mean, the question is, why put it in there? Well, why not, is my question. We just passed on Friday several bills that the previous speaker was in a co-sponsor to, all had legislative intents on those bills. So I think that it's important not only for those who are looking at this legislation, but to understand the history behind the legislation. It's important to know that. Many times lawyers or even judges, when they're looking at laws, it's not quite clear. So what they do is they revert to the legislative intent of the law to understand it more thoroughly, because, you know, we're not all great, writers of bills. We try to be, and that's why we have a legal, someone from legal to review our legislation, to make sure we put all our ducks in order, cross our T's, dot our I's. But sometimes things slip. And having a legislative intent gives the authority for anyone to completely understand the intent. And I think I fully support this amendment to the legislation. So thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator Chadwick. Anyone else on the amendment? Senator San Nicolas, you may proceed.
Hi, good morning, Madam Speaker and fellow colleagues again. I support the amendment. It's a good amendment. I remember, working up there at the airport as a customs officer. They had a time went by. There was the Asian economic crisis. We went from 20 flights a day to 4 flights a day. We went from 4,000 visitors to half that in a day. And I watched as each of the concession stands closed down. One of my favorite one was the ice cream concession up by 19th, the 19th gate, gate 19. But time has come, and we do recognize all the difficulties that we've faced, pandemic, Marwar, and just this constant or this extraordinary circumstances back to back has put strain on the businesses throughout the island, not just at the airport. But any chance we have an opportunity to help our businesses, I think we should be more proactive when it comes to supporting our businesses. Lee Kuan Yew would always say, the moment you make profit a bad word, so we all suffer. Why? Because who pays for all of this? Businesses pay for all of this. Taxpayer people pay for this. But it's mostly on the backs of our businesses. And if we don't support them, we're pretty much shooting ourselves in the foot, and we're not supporting ourselves. I think it's time we show the businesses and people out there that we care, and we want to put them all back on track. We all get back on track together, and this amendment and this bill does that. And I thank my colleague, Senator Joe San Augustine and Senator Lujan, for proffering the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very well. Do you have a point of information, Speaker Chulai?
Yes, point of information, Madam Speaker. The amendment is stating it's the uncertainty caused by the COVID-19 and the typhoon and geopolitical issues risen over the past several years. But at the hearing, the testimony was that with the exception of the agreement with Loti, every other concession had expired more than 2 years ago, in other words, pre-pandemic. Thank you.
Duly noted, Speaker Chulai. On the amendment, no one else wishes to speak. Senator San Augustine, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd ask my co-sponsor to close the amendment. Thank you.
Senator Lon, I will allow you to close on that amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the reason for the amendment, of course, is to clearly state what we are passing as a bill. Every bill that I support and have voted for has a legislative intent. And every bill that I voted for, feels in the best interest of the island. And so the amendment simply states, it is important to state that, of course, when some try to obfuscate or confuse a simple concept and the purpose, we're here really to try to help of the airport. The Guam Airport Authority has asked us to help, and have provided ample justification. We just need to help and act in the best interests for the island and the Guam Airport Authority, AB Wampa Guam International Airport Authority. And again, it's adding the intent, the reason why we are trying to pass this bill. And again, every bill, if I'm not mistaken, so far that I voted for, has an intent. That's exactly what it is. And they came for help. We provide the help that is asked of this legislative body. With that, thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator Lahan. On the motion, on the amendment as proffered by Senator San Augustine and Senator Lujan, there has been a opposition to that. Let me rephrase that. On the amendment, are there any objections? There is an objection. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Motion carries. On the main motion, before I ask anybody to speak, I'll address Senator Duenas, but on the motion, Senator San Augustine, can you move it to the third reading, please?
I apologize. Yes, motion to move to third reading, even though we're ready to open
With
the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator San Augustine. I will address Senator Duenas Mananasizuas. Please proceed.
Sidus Masi, Madam Chair. And once again, as I mentioned during the discussion on the amendment, I rise in support of this bill. So I want to address a couple of things that were mentioned on the objection of the amendment. And it's actually in support of the bill as well. You know, Madam Chair, I think it'll be tough for us on Guam to find any business that, yes, had an opportunity to receive COVID relief, and maybe there was some abatements to rent, but the largest competitor or the largest venue said on the record during the public hearing they remained in good standing and paid their rent. But going back to my main point, did any one of us, when the limited restaurants could open, run up and eat Burger King at the airport? Did any one of us go buy luxury goods at the airport? No, because it's an airport. You're a vendor in the airport. You know, Madam Chair, it's been said, and a lot of people have talked about this, because of the pandemic funds and everything that flowed into our economy, it was actually a very robust economy. As a matter of fact, Madam Chair, we had 3 years of massive surpluses, and when businesses weren't locked down, a lot of them were doing very well. Because you don't have to go to an airport or pass through an airport to patronize that business. And maybe looking back, the airport maybe will find something new in the next pandemic. There's no planes coming in, but you can still come up here and shop and eat. Madam Chair, we don't have any control over the procurement at the airport. We are trying to pass legislation that gives them, as we've mentioned many times on other bills in this House, a tool in the toolbox. It doesn't confine the airport to making any decision, but it gives them leverage to be able to work with businesses in good standing if they see that that's what is fit. Now, we're talking about litigation, Madam Chair, and it's not going to prevent, any word we say on this floor is not going to prevent any litigation, because if somebody's going to litigate, they're going to litigate. And it's not going to matter whether there's an extension or not an extension. Because the bottom line is, you're talking about now reverse litigation where somebody who's discriminated against, when they can clearly point out that they had a business that was confined and they had no way of making money, that they are deserving of that opportunity to recoup money. Madam Chair, if there was revenue and things that they could actually do business, that might be a different story. But they could not do business. So I just want to dispel any notion that any one of us in this body who plans to support this legislation is somehow trying to do a favor. Once again, going back to the testimony of Ricky Hernandez, very clear that this is industry-wide throughout the United States, probably the world, because they're businesses that are doing business in an airport, a very specialized place to be a vendor. If you have a hot dog stand, you don't have to be in Agotnya, like the very successful Mrs. Ngokta. You can hitch that thing up to a truck and go to Jigu. You can go to Malesu. But when you're in an airport, you have to sell goods and services in an airport. Madam Chair, the mentioning of, the other businesses have been on a month-to-month for 2 years. Of course, Madam Chair, what airport or what organization is going to put out a procurement in the middle of a pandemic? Who's going to come and make a proposal when you have no doggone idea when that airport's going to open again for passenger traffic, other than medicines and cargo? There's another thing, Madam Chair. Good thing for Guam's resiliency, sometimes I would talk to some of the airlines and some of the others and say, man, we sure are doing bang-up business when it comes to goods and supplies. But those goods and supplies don't get off the plane and go buy a luxury good or eat a hamburger. Madam Chair, I just look at this bill as a practical matter. Not a sneaking around the back, not a trying to do anything for special interest. I see it as you have a confined business operation. Yeah, that maybe they were able to get loans. Maybe their employees got some PPE. Maybe that happened. But businesses operate not just on their employees getting paid and maybe a loan for their company to continue or some abatement on rent. They operate for a profit. They have put hundreds of thousands and many times millions of dollars into their brand, into their concession, into their operation. If every business went into business to just survive, we wouldn't have businesses. You're in business to make money. Once again, Madam Chair, yes, many businesses, and I don't see a piece of legislation on the floor right now to say, well, then let's give all these abatements to other businesses. You'd have to go through a categorization because you're going to have to find businesses that were literally confined to that as being their only method of operation. Absent the shutdown, a lot of businesses had patronage from people who had checks that were even bigger than their regular checks under PPE and All Rise and all kinds of other millions of dollars that were floating in here. Otherwise, we would have never had those surpluses that each one of us has had the luxury of appropriating. So once again, coconuts and mangoes, in my opinion. That's the comparison, in my humble opinion. I want to close because I feel like I need to reiterate this. I do not stand here in support of this bill because I have any interest in any business or any operation up there at the airport. Nor do or will I ever have any interest in skirting a procurement law or doing a favor. I stand here because this jumps out to me as an obvious, reasonable proposal that doesn't say one way or the other, Madam Chair, that you must do this. If they choose to, through their procurement control, unless there's going to be a bill to remove procurement control from the airport, if they decide we've got this tool, but we're going to go ahead and go bid, it doesn't mean that they have to do extensions because this bill was passed. It means that they can, for all the possible practical reasons that I just laid out. I pray that that's been a sensible argument. I'm sure it will be countered, which is fine. That's what we do here. But I wanted to make sure for those that will pull me aside when I walk through my favorite stores and after Mass, when I get a little extra sunshine on the top of my head, talking to the good people of Guam, or anywhere else I go, why did I support this? I support it because it's a practical matter, in my humble opinion. Seduce Masi, Madam Chair.
Buen provecho, Senator Dueñas. Before I call the next speaker on the motion who wishes to speak, colleagues, I would like to acknowledge the Department of Youth Affairs Summer Internship Program, and I'd like to recognize some of the summer youth interns that will be working for the Guam Legislature this month. So please give them a round of applause and welcome them into the hall of the 37th Guam Legislature, the Antonio Ompinco Session Hall. Thank you. Thank you for, you have the privilege of watching the colleagues here debate on the floor on Bill 130-37 COR. So thank you for your interest. On the motion, anyone else wishing to speak on the main motion? If not, Senator Sanagas. On the main motion? On the bill? Yes, most definitely. If not, if no one else wishes to speak, Speaker Terlahi, I see your hand raised up. You may speak on the main motion. Colleagues, I'm going to support a 1-minute recess to the speaker. We are in recess. Imina Trentay, Shetina Legislature and Guahan is back from recess. Speaker Terlahi, you have the floor at this time on the main motion.
Thank you very much. And I know that if I speak, some people will stand up after me and probably attack me for saying these things. But I have nothing personal in this game. And I'm just trying to do what my job is here, and that is to be very critical. When the legislature wants to put itself in the middle of litigation, first of all, when the legislature wants to dictate the terms of procurement, second of all. So to start from the beginning, this bill is a very unique. It's been done before, but it I think, requires scrutiny, to say the least. Where we're going to go in, where the airport did not re-solicit for vendors, concessionaires. It didn't. This is even before the pandemic. They did not. And when we asked them why now, after those leases have been expired for years, do you want us to come in and extend those for 3 years? Give them, in other words, a new lease for 3 years. Under terms that are not known to us. This is not one of those cases where they gave us the lease and we are approving it. It's another one of those cases where they just want the authority to renegotiate a lease, and they want us to wash our hands of it and say, do whatever you want, even if you lose money for the government of Guam, and enter into these deals and make new leases with these people, leaving out every other potential bidders. That's big. And it was done prior to the pandemic, except for the case of Loti. But for all the other vendors, if the testimony is correct, this is the deputy director telling us they didn't do it not because of the pandemic, because it was pre-pandemic. They didn't do it because of the litigation. So what we're doing, instead of resolving whatever caused that litigation or what's continuing to tie it up, I'm not sure, to be honest with you, if we are interfering with that litigation. And that's why I'm really very cautious. And when they would not explain to us, they said they couldn't even give us explanations because of the litigation. I don't like to act blindly like that. So they did not re-solicit for the spaces that were expiring. In other words, the Burger King, like my colleague's talking about, they did not re-solicit those prior to the pandemic because of litigation. And then, during the pandemic, I am sure these people suffered losses. And I want to take care of employees there just like I want to take care of employees across the government of Guam. But I do not, in doing that, want to throw out what is the very basic value of our whole entire procurement system, and that is competition. If we cannot do this competitively, there's something very interesting going on. And I would think that if this is of so much value to these people, despite the losses that they were suffering up there at the airport, and they want to continue up there, that it is very valuable. And if it's valuable to them, it would be valuable to others who would want to bid. And that's what this bill would do. It precludes any other company from bidding for 3 more years. Not for 1 more year because of the typhoon, not for 1 more year because we're still getting out of the pandemic, but for 3 more years. And when my colleague said, talking about the legislative intent is what the courts are going to look at. Absolutely, spot on. When we put into the legislative intent that this very unusual process is in the best interest of the government of Guam, the territory of Guam, the people of Guam, then the courts are going to take all their common sense out of it and say, okay, that was the finding of the legislature, that this is in the best interest of the people of Guam. And let me tell you why that's relevant. Because there's a certain part, the term best interest is used in at least 7 places of the procurement code. But the part I want to talk about today is, it's when there's already an award. And what do they do when they find that the award is in violation of the procurement law? There's a big, huge exception. If, after an award, it is determined that a solicitation or award of a contract is in violation of a law, then the contract may be ratified and affirmed, provided it is determined that doing so is in the best interests of Guam. If the person awarded the contract has acted fraudulently or in bad faith, the contract may be ratified and affirmed if such action is in the best interests of Guam. So I just want the record to be clear that that is a potential use of the legislative intent that's been put into this bill. And without that, we remain a little bit more neutral in the litigation that's ongoing between these multi-million-dollar companies. There must be a lot at stake. We saw at the hearing, 100% of the people there, besides the airport management and board members, was one concessionaire, the large one. And the other issue I have with this bill is that they're not asking us to simply continue the lease. You know, for example, we're in the middle of a typhoon, continue the lease for 1 more year and we will get to the solicitation. No, they said they're not going to get to the solicitation until they do rules and regs. Well, I asked, where are the rules and regs? Oh, we're still working on that. And it's all dependent on this litigation. And they also said they want to renegotiate the lease, not just authority for us to extend the leases. No, they want to renegotiate those leases. That means, and I kept asking them over and over, if you wanted to extend it, then we would know the terms. But by asking us to give you the authority to renegotiate, we know nothing about what they're going to come up with. Nothing. And I kept asking them, are you trying to reduce the rent? And they wouldn't admit to that. But clearly, that's the authority that we're giving them in this bill. So when they said in one hand, the airport, that they're doing this because they need to maintain revenues, this is so important to their revenues, I disagree. Because if they were interested in revenues, they should bid it out and get the highest bidder, and hopefully more than what they're getting now. And if they needed to just simply continue with the revenues that were dictated under these leases, they would have done that. But they're asking us to give them authority to totally renegotiate all terms, meaning rental payments, area, usages. And normally when the legislature is going to approve a lease, that's what we do. We see the lease and we approve it, and that's not the case here. So I'm just not sure how this is in the best interest of the government of Guam, because it hasn't been laid out in front of us. That's the issue. GVB is projecting tourism is going to come back, and they are spending millions of dollars on it. And they don't say 3 more years. they're going for it. And as one of my colleagues told us right before this typhoon, I mean, they were successful. And so I expect that of them as well in the upcoming fiscal year. And that's another reason why I question this multi-year contract that we are approving without knowing any of the terms. Multi-year. First of all, it's prohibited by the current airport law to extend any of these leases. So we're going against previous laws to extend this lease. We're going against the multi-year lease law that says lay it out, and you have to spell out exceptional reasons why these should be extended. And I'm just saying again that if it's the typhoon is the exceptional reason, then every single procurement with the government of Guam should be extended. I'm not proposing to do that. I think all the other businesses are able to, avail themselves of all the resources available and try to make a go of it. And we're trying to support them through the LEAP and other programs. Federal assistance programs as well. These companies also can avail of those things. So I just think there's a lot of things in front of us today that should give us pause at the very least. And if we can't get explanations, don't pass it. Force them to give you the explanations. Why? What do they intend to renegotiate? And why are they not resoliciting? And they said it's because of the litigation, but they won't tell us exactly what they mean by that. And again, I think the airport is in one side of this litigation, and I don't remember all of it, but all I know is it's because of the procurement. It's a procurement litigation. And here we are messing around with procurement and litigation in the middle of a big lawsuit, in the middle of what is a battle between giants in this industry. And what I want is fairness. I want fairness for all the companies on Guam to be able to bid on spaces in the airport. I believe those have tremendous value, highly coveted still. Despite the typhoon and despite the pandemic, those are still highly coveted, and that they would get value for their money if the airport would resolicit those. So I just want to put that on the record, that I'm not pro or against any of the companies up there. I'm not trying to harm the employees, but I do think there's something going wrong when the airport couldn't put those bids out even prior to the pandemic. And this cannot be the way that we solve this problem, is by continuing it longer and longer. We should get to the root of it and solve it. And I asked the airport, I actually sent a letter, FOIA, asking them for I want to see all the rules and regs that they've tried to do over the years. I want to get to the bottom of that. And I don't have time to study the whole entire litigation myself, but I'm very curious. I cannot imagine that if they're prohibited from acting because of the litigation, they're prohibited from talking to us because of the litigation, that we, the legislature, are going to jump into the middle of this litigation. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Madam Speaker. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Senator San-Agustin, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm almost lost for words, and everybody wants to talk about everything under the sky. This bill is very simple. Authorize the extension of concession. And I ask my colleagues to support this bill and that we move this to the voting file. And now, outstanding the House rules, that we move the vote without engrossment. Thank you.
There is a motion to move to the voting file. Are there any objections? There is an objection. All those in favor of moving it to the voting file, please signify by raising your hand. Motion carries. On the motion to vote without engrossment, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries.
Ministro Teixeira Legislature Guam is back from recess. There was a motion to vote on the third reading file and on Bill 130-37 COR without engrossment. So the files have been passed out. The bill does not reflect the amendment made on the floor. Senator San Augustine?
Madam Speaker, I ask that we excuse our colleagues that are not present today.
There's a motion to excuse colleagues who are not present today from voting. Is there any objection? No objection. Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now on the third reading file, Bill number 130-37 COR. Clerks, please read the title.
Bill number 130-37 COR, as amended on the floor, introduced by Joe S. San Augustine, Roy A.B. Canata, Jesse A. Lohan, Dwayne T.D. Sinicolas, William A. Parkinson, Christopher M. Duenas, Thomas J. Fisher. An act relative to authorizing the extension of concession agreements of the Antonio B. Wampat International Airport Authority, Guam.
Roll call.
Senator Barnett. Senator Barnett, nay. Senator Blas. Senator Blas, aye. Senator Brown. Senator Brown, nay. Senator Duenas. Senator Duenas, aye. Senator Fisher. Senator Fisher, aye. Senator Lujan. Senator Lujan, aye. Vice Speaker Muñoz-Barnes. Vice Speaker Muñoz-Barnes, aye. Senator Parkinson. Senator Parkinson, aye. Senator Perez. Senator Perez excused. Senator Canata. Senator Canata, aye. Senator San Augustine. Senator San Augustine, aye. Senator Sinicolas. Senator Sinicolas, aye. Senator Shelton. Senator Shelton excused. Senator Titagui. Senator Titagui pass. Speaker Terlahi. Speaker Terlahi, nay. Senator Titagui. Senator Titagui pass. Senator Titagui. Senator Titagui, aye.
Bill number 130-37 COR received 10 ayes, 3 nays, and 2 excused. Bill number 130-37 COR is duly passed by this body. We're now on brief extension of remarks. Would anyone like to be recognized in a brief extension of remarks? Are there any announcements? All right, if not, then Assistant Majority Leader, Senator San Augustine, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to adjourn the session until, subject to the call of the Speaker.
On that motion to adjourn session subject to the call of the Speaker, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, we are adjourned subject to the call of the Speaker. Situs Masi, colleagues.